In what was known as largest forced migration in human history, at least 12 million Africans were forcibly taken to the Americas between the year 1500 and the end of slave trade in the 1860s. My guests today are from Connecting to Africa, otherwise called CTA, a group helping African Nova Scotians connect to the continent. It's good to have you in the studio, ladies and the gentlemen here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's start with you, if you want to introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. I'm Barb Hamilton Hinch, and I'm an associate professor at Dalhousie University and an assistant vice provost equity inclusion. And I come from the communities of Beachville, Nova Scotia, and Cherrybrook.
Right. And you want to go?
Hi, Promise. How are you?
Good.
My name is Wayne Hamilton. I'm from the Republic of Beachville. And I used to work with African Nova Scotian Affairs. I left that, and now I'm working with the Association of Black Social Workers.
Interesting.
And Kieran Hudson, a principal at Auburn Drive High School. And I come from, well, actually I hail from the nation of Preston. So I'm originally from Cherrybrook Lake Lone community.
Preston is such a popular place, and I'm so pleased to have you all in the studio once again.
Thank you.
Now that we've met you, let's also know the organization that you represent, and then let's know the inspiration behind what you are all doing there.
Well, the title of the organization, Connecting to Africa, we shorten it to be CTA. And we have three main pillars that we try to honor and uphold: awareness, advocacy, and action. And so over the years, we've been able to try to continue this relationship that we want to build with folks on the continent of Africa by taking them on what we would call learning projects.
Interesting. And then what you do over there?
So when we go to Ghana, could be Sierra Leone, but I've been to Ghana, West Africa. We have the opportunity to actually meet with community-based organizations and develop partnerships. So it could be with educational institutions there or individuals. It could be women projects as well in the north. It could be development projects as well. Knowledge-based projects in terms of understanding how knowledge is developed from an Afrocentric or African perspective. And women and girls. And so we have the opportunity to actually get to know how they operate, and we develop information. Actually, we communicate the information, and we share knowledge, and we have strong bonds and we become friends, and it's like a big family. And that's what we feel like. It's a big family in terms of going over, taking part in the work, and being sincere of the individuals that are there on the ground, and actually learning, probably more so than what you think that you may have the perception that you already know, but when you go, you learn more. And so you have to be open to the experience and open to the people as well.
Yeah, it's not like it's for everybody that's able to say, I want to go.
Right.
Because we try to do a process of selection. Because I think to take on the journey to go to Africa, you need to have a certain kind of mindset to begin with. And we're not all about going to spend time on the beach or just being there for all the culture to soak it all up, but rather create bonds and connections. That's why Connecting to Africa. So we do have a Pan-African notion that says we've got to build ourselves together as a group.
Yeah.
And I think some of the inspiration comes from the fact that we've all lived and worked in different parts of the continent.
Yeah.
And I think our own personal growth of what we experienced when we were there, because we weren't there on vacation. We were there to learn or to contribute and to also learn ourselves. And so coming back for me and having that opportunity to bring other folks that never would have those opportunities to go was really important.
Right.
And seeing the growth of the individuals that we've taken and what they have to say when they come back to Nova Scotia.
Right. I must apologize to you all for thinking in the first place that it's all about vacationing, but now that you've said that it's about learning, I'm super interested in this part. But tell us exactly what countries in Africa have you visited, and what was your experience like generally about Africa?
The very first country that I visited was Sierra Leone, and that was very important to me. At that time, my big brother and cousin Wayne would have been in Nigeria and came back to Nova Scotia after having been in Sierra Leone and said, there's a group of Hamiltons in Sierra Leone. Does anyone want to go and meet family? And so I was fortunate to have traveled with two of my brothers. My brother Blaine and I took off in December and went to Sierra Leone. So that was my first country. And having been in Sierra Leone, it's like, how can I do this more often? It was just felt like being welcomed home.
Right.
And so then I had the opportunity to go and live and work in the Gambia for 2 years.
Wow.
And then from the Gambia, I would travel to Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, and then came back shortly after my journeys and connected to Africa, became a part of us, and have since been able to take youth and adults to Zambia, to Ghana. So it's been very enriching for me and for others. So that's my experiences.
It's interesting. I'm eager to hear your experience as well.
Oh, okay. Ray's gonna go. Well, I had the opportunity when I was in university to go to Kenya, and actually I worked over there within in a rural community for a year and teaching and working with the people, and so that just sparked my interest in international development studies. And so at that particular time, I was like struggling in terms of what I wanted to do, and I know that I wanted to do community development because my heart is with community. I wanted to have that experience, but I also wanted to be closer to family care. And so how could I combine both of those worlds? And so that was my first and initial in terms of going to Kenya. And then in 1994, I had the opportunity to take part in the first historic democratic election in South Africa as an international monitor. And I always participate with Oxfam Canada and Canadian Crossroads International. Right. So that gave me my foundation in terms of community development and working within my own community of Preston area, Cherrybrook, Lake Loon. And so I had the opportunity to go travel on foot, hitchhike a little bit as well in the eastern part of Africa. And then when I went to Connected to Africa, that was my first exposure to West Africa in terms of Ghana.
Yeah. Wayne, I'm going to let you speak to the experience you've had because you seem to have spent much more time in Africa than anyone else. But then there's this stereotype and misconceptions about Africa, ranging from poverty, that's, I mean, like you talked about the little box thing, poverty, safety or insecurity. These are some of the things that the West has about Africa. Tell us a bit about your experience living in Africa.
Well, you're absolutely right around that misconception about what Africa is. Right. And I believe that is because it's media driven as an image of Africa being in poverty, Africa being in war, Africa being in famine. But that is not the case when you get the opportunity to actually be in the place and actually have the experiences about connecting to people that are like you, if you're of African descent, and you have the same kind of aspirations for a better life. And I was really fortunate because I was able to spend some time in Nigeria, in the northern part. And then because I wasn't quite finished with understanding this continent, I decided to stay a little bit longer. And the family was really concerned because I didn't come home for Christmas or I didn't come home for birthdays. And I wound up staying for close to 8 years. And then it was a matter of saying, I got to understand more. And so I came back, got a degree in planning, went back, found myself in Ibadan for a little while, then found myself being what they call a volunteer cooperant placement officer. And that allowed me really to see a bit more of the continent because I was having to place Canadians into what they would call volunteer placements. So it's been a really good journey for me.
Interesting. It's good to know.
And then we connected with Wayne.
Connected with him. Connected you guys back.
Well, it was interesting what he was doing with urban planning. So I said that we have to do something because of that whole perception, right?
And she was at Dalhousie, and I can remember us having a conversation around, oh, Karen, you're back. We should get together. And Barb, she was at YMCA at the time.
Exactly.
YMCA. And so we know each other from growing up.
Right.
So we actually sat down and said, experiences. How can we give other African Nova Scotians the sense of what we saw, what we experienced? And so we decided, let's form an organization. All in favor, say aye.
That's right. This is not the Hollywood kind of organization, right? This is like we're actually getting down to grassroots work.
Right.
So, now, talking about organization that which you have all set up, I think there's a lot of planning that goes into getting these trips, selecting the people. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do behind the scene, getting people ready, taking them on these trips? How do you decide on what locations and what activities and what organizations you will be meeting when you get to Africa? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's a really detailed process of selecting people, and often when we try to do it a year in advance, and so that individuals can spend time together. because the reality is in some of our trips, people had to share a house. And so if you can imagine what it's like bringing strangers together to live in a house for sometimes 2 weeks to a month.
Right.
And so it's important to sort out personalities, what you like, what you don't like, even in terms of grocery shopping. And I remember some of our trips going and buying food and sometimes having to cook them for ourselves. And before we go, we bring in different consultants in terms of we have our medical doctor who's been with us for a long time, Dr. David Haas.
Oh, okay.
He'll come in and do some preparation around what to expect when you travel, what to do to stay safe. Depending on what country we go to, we'll bring in individuals from those countries to talk about culture, to get folks ready for what they're going to experience. And so we want to make sure that when our participants go with us, that they're going to be well informed, that they're going to be clear on what's expected in terms of culture, religion, dress, food, language, traditional norms. We often have the opportunity to meet chiefs and queen mothers. So how do you meet chiefs and queen mothers? So we don't want to go and not be respectful to the country that we're going into. So we spend a lot of time in working with the participants and making sure that all our T's and our I's are dotted. Because as we go as an organization, we want to make sure that folks are representing CTA as well as Nova Scotia, as well as African Nova Scotians. So we're very intentional. There's usually an application process or a selection process, and then many people get picked and some don't.
But one of the points that Barb made, I think, should be emphasized, and that is this built-in assumption that because I'm Black, it'll be easy for me to go. And we try to dispel that to say, no, there's a commonality with the color of your skin and the DNA, but there's a cultural difference that you've got to understand. And so we spend time really walking through what is a cross-cultural experience going to be like. Because if you can imagine, people here are on the clock. And when we go that side, it's not necessarily about the clock, it's about relationships. So how do you get people here to understand relationships are more important? And so when you think about who can show up in that space, the right kind of a way, it means that not everybody's ready to go because they don't have that opportunity to truly embrace this notion of being in a different culture.
And I assume that whenever they come back with stories, exchanges of cultural exchanges and the likes. What are those things you want to share with us that those who participated in these trips have come back to speak to?
Yeah, we want them to share like what they've learned and what they saw.
What they learned, the experiences they had.
Their experience there, how they got to the point where they are, because sometimes it changed their mindset. So you go there, you may have this perception, but by being there and, seeing, when we went to the castle, Elmina Castle, or Cape Coast Castle, and actually to go to that door no return, it was quite emotional for some individuals. So for them to even to go through and to imagine what their ancestors went through and to read about it, only a little bit that you may hear about here in Nova Scotia, but when you actually go there, and you see for yourself.
And you have a feel of it.
That's right. It changes your emotions and your mindset. And then you come back and you make others aware about what you actually will experience when you go there. So you have to be open to lots of different things. So that awareness piece is critical. But sharing is what we want them to do when they come back. And so they have opportunity to speak to community groups and schools. They spoke to government officials. They made presentations. And then we always try to make sure that they go with that understanding that you're representing not just yourself, but your community and, Black Nova Scotians, and then also the people on the continent.
And I think it's important that you made an important point, Karen, that people are responsible to come back and still commit to a part of CTA.
Yes.
So you don't just go do the learning project and then come back and go back to your everyday life. There is an expectation that you will be doing presentations. And if you're called on to go into a school, that you'll go into a school. And so they usually have to maintain a commitment for up to 3 months after they return.
That's
what we ask for them, to maintain a commitment. Cool. And so you do sign a participant agreement form that outlines these expectations. And so that's why it's very important for folks to say, yes, I can give this commitment, or no, I can't. And usually if it's the no, I can't, and it doesn't continue, then we make note of that. We don't do any disciplinary measure, but we realize that, okay, that happened, and we'll go on to our next group. But our expectation is that you come back, you do presentations, you get other folks excited about the next trip, and that you continue with some of those learnings and some of those commitments.
So what do you think is the future for your organization? What do you want to be in the next 5 years thereabout?
I'm glad you asked that question, because we actually are trying to transition for that next 5 years. we've expanded the board structure that we have so that it's not only Barb, Karen, and I, but a few others that are like minds to try to see if we can advance. One of the things that we're trying to advance is actually volunteer sending.
All
The
right.
notion of trying to have people from here spend 3 to 4 to 5 months in African country in order to really be grounded in that. So we could see that as one of the things that we want to take on as being an organization that's also volunteer sending.
Yep.
The other thing that I think that we're in a really good position to do is be a bridge between the African Nova Scotia communities that are here and the newcomer diaspora population that are our brothers and sisters, our aunts and our uncles and our cousins. And it'd be really great for a CTA to be able to mount an activity or an event, but have both of those solitudes be able to participate in it.
Right.
So I think if we were thinking about the future of the next little while, those two things I think would be
Yes.
front and
Right.
center.
Pre-interview, we touched on some of these things, especially on how we can build the bridge between those who have come from Africa to meet us here, and how we can make it not just a bridge, but a solid one moving forward, where our kids unborn will be able to ride on it. But as we wrap up, I just want to ask again, how can people get involved in what you're doing, and to what extent can they really, if you, and where they can find your website, if you have contact address or anything?
We are building a website.
Okay.
We are building a
Okay.
website. And I think the only contact information that we could leave behind is probably one of our emails, because we're grassroots in terms of it's just the three of us
Yes.
with not having a administrator or anything of that nature. But we are planning to do some activities so that we would probably maybe use the good nature of you guys to be able to promote what we're all about. But for right now, I think people just got to stay tuned for looking for CTA and different types of activities that we plan to do. We would get it out to the communities.
Awesome. This is so beautiful. This is the best place to leave this conversation. I want to thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you
you
for
for
having us.
coming to the show and talking to us about CTA.
Well, thank you.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
inviting us.
Awesome. We have been talking to the people behind Connecting to Africa, otherwise called CTA, a group behind helping African Nova Scotians connect to the continent. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel, click the like button and hit the notification bell. Till we come your way again, I am Promise Accord. Bye for now.